What if the deepest scars we carry were shaped years before we even knew how to fight back? This is the story of a man whose life spiraled into chaos after a haunting betrayal, one that began when he was just 14 years old. Picture this: a packed courtroom, tension thick enough to slice through. All spectators are glued to their seats, hanging on every word of the man at the stand. We'll call him Jake. As he begins to speak, his voice trembles not from fear, but from the weight of a secret he has carried for decades. "I'm here to tell you what he did to me," Jake asserts, his gaze locking onto the defendant. In that moment, he wasn't just speaking for himself. He was a voice for every person who's carried their silence as a badge of shame, an unbearable burden that refused to let them live freely. You could feel the room freeze as Jake peeled back layers of himself, revealing the boy he once was, a boy who dreamed of becoming a man, only to be shattered by betrayal in a way that would echo throughout his life. At just 14, Jake was vibrant, full of life, unaware of the darkness that lurked nearby. But what started as a normal friendship morphed into a nightmare when that trust was broken. He detailed how the very person who was meant to guide and protect him became the villain in his story. "He took my innocence, and in that moment he shattered my world," Jake asserted, a fire igniting in his voice. He went on to share how this betrayal didn't just change him, it consumed him. The psychological scars were invisible but profoundly deep. We often underestimate how trauma expresses itself. Jake spiraled, not into rebellion or anger, but into silence. A question that became a vicious cycle, feeding on his fears and replacing hope with despair. As his testimony echoed in the courtroom, you could see the flickers of recognition in the faces around him. For some, it was empathy sparking to life. For others, perhaps a haunting reflection of their own unresolved traumas. Jake was exposing a truth that is often ignored. The past refuses to stay buried. It seeps into our relationships, careers, and self-perceptions. He recounted how the years rolled on, each one a heavy reminder of that fractured moment in time. Every failed relationship, every anxiety attack was a reminder of the betrayal that loomed over him like a storm cloud. Jake attested to battling demons that refused to fade, illuminating the profound psychological impact of betrayal and abandonment, how these issues can echo into adulthood, shaping decisions and future relationships. Yet, something remarkable happened in that courtroom. Jake wasn't just reliving his trauma, he was reclaiming his narrative. As he spoke, cascades of emotion ebbed and flowed: anger, sorrow, and ultimately strength. He reminded everyone present that healing begins with acknowledgement. By refusing to carry his secret into the shadows any longer, he reclaimed not just his voice, but the power that was stripped from him long ago. In that moment, Jake became a symbol of resilience, a reminder to all of us that the process of healing isn't linear, it's often jagged and raw. But just like him, we all have the potential to stand up, speak out, and break the chains that bind us to our past. What if the very fabric of your life unraveled in an instant because of someone you were supposed to trust? What if you held that secret inside you for years, only to reveal it at a moment when everything was on the line? Imagine a courtroom filled with tense anticipation, a sea of faces waiting for the truth to spill forth. At the center of that storm stands a man named Derek, gripping the podium like a lifeline. You can see the turmoil written all over him, etched in the lines of his face. What follows is a story that grips the soul, a haunting tale that takes us back to when Derek was just 14 years old. Now, visualize young Derek, a bright-eyed boy filled with dreams and laughter. But beneath that innocent exterior lurked a troubled secret of friendship with a man he thought was his protector, a family friend who he trusted implicitly. That bond, however, turned sinister when that same man crossed a line that would leave deep psychological scars. "I was just a child," Derek testified, the tremor in his voice revealing years of suppressed pain. He spoke of nights filled with dread, of trust shattered in a moment that felt both like a lifetime and an eternity. The air in the courtroom grew thick with tension as Derek recounted the specifics of that betrayal, moments that no child should ever have to endure. He turned a safe space into a prison, he said, his eyes ablaze with fury and grief. Betrayal, they say, is a knife that cuts deep. For Derek, the impact was life-altering. As he poured his heart out, the crowd fell silent, captivated by the courage it took to finally speak his truth. It's a stark reality that many survivors face, how the past clings to us, shaping relationships and distorting self-worth. But the power of his testimony lay not only in the horror of what happened, but in the resilience that followed. Derek spoke of how he turned to silence, masking his pain with layers of anger and confusion. "I was a ghost, haunted by my own life," he declared. The courtroom vibrated as the unyielding weight of trauma filtered through the air's silent acknowledgement of the invisible battles fought by so many. As Derek elaborated, it became clear that the psychological ramifications of such betrayal run deep. It's not just trauma, it's an insidious force that can consume entire lives. His struggles with intimacy, trust, and self-love became part of his confessional, revealing the chaos woven into his day-to-day existence. Every moment felt tainted, every connection a potential landmine, he confessed. As his words echoed off the courtroom walls, you could almost feel the collective gasp, a silent recognition that we are often steeped in our traumas, sometimes without even knowing it. Derek was breaking the chains of silence that bound him, and in doing so, inviting others to reflect on their own burdens. A vigilante in his own right, he was not merely recounting a horrific past. He was setting himself free, forcing the audience to confront the uncomfortable truths of betrayal and resilience. Derek was not just sharing his story. He was shining a glaring spotlight on the darkness, illuminating the path toward healing. What happens when a buried secret bubbles to the surface, shaking the very foundations of a courtroom? In the bustling heart of the courtroom, where every eye was fixed with rapt attention, stood a man named Lucas, trembling with adrenaline, ready to confront his past. The air was charged with tension. Whispers faded into silence as he prepared to unravel a story that would shatter the illusion of safety and trust. "I'm here to expose the truth," he declared, his voice unwavering despite the storm raging inside him. As Lucas recounted his tale, a palpable gravity settled over the room. He painted a picture of his younger self, a spirited 14-year-old, filled with ambition and dreams. But behind that facade lurked a darkness he could never have anticipated. He spoke about a friendship that had begun innocently, an older man who had been hailed as a mentor, someone who promised to guide him. But that promise morphed into a betrayal that would haunt him for years. "One moment changed everything," Lucas asserted, his voice breaking as he detailed the harrowing events that unfolded. That moment transcended mere misfortune. It marked the beginning of trauma that would shadow his every step into adulthood. "He manipulated my trust, turned my innocence into something grotesque. I became a prisoner in a silent hell," he confessed, each word resonating like thunderclaps in the still courtroom. As he spoke, the psychological implications of his experience began to reach beyond the walls of the courtroom. Lucas shared how the betrayal warped his sense of self. He battled feelings of guilt and confusion, asking, "Why didn't I fight back?" These questions are all too common in survivors of trauma, creating a cycle of shame and self-blame. But in that moment, he transcended victimhood, reclaiming his narrative. With every breath, Lucas dismantled the facade of control imposed upon him. He illustrated how this betrayal wasn't just a single act. It seeped into every facet of his life. From strained relationships to crippling anxiety, the impact was profound and often invisible to those around him. "I navigated life like a minefield," he explained, as the audience felt the weight of his truth converge on them. A collective understanding surged through the room, illuminating the dark corners of hidden struggles. Yet, Lucas's journey was not one of mere despair. His testimony blossomed into a call for resilience. He spoke of therapy, of finally starting to understand that healing is not linear. It's jagged, painful, and essential. "I started to rebuild brick by delicate brick," he said, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. The courtroom that had once been a place of fear transformed into a sacred ground for healing, where vulnerability turned into strength. In that moment, Lucas galvanized not only himself but everyone present. As he stood tall, he embodied the idea that true strength lies in confronting our traumas rather than burying them. "I refuse to be defined by this," he declared, positioning himself not just as a survivor but as a warrior rising from the ashes of his past. And so, in this climactic moment, Lucas wasn't simply sharing a painful memory. He was instilling a powerful message, one that echoed through the walls of that courtroom and into the hearts of all who heard. In a world where silence often reigns, he chose to speak, and in doing so, he invited everyone to dismantle their own shackles of silence, to rise toward healing.